a little warm in here.
We didn't talk about this
since we've known each other so long.
We didn't talk about this, did we? Did I tell you to wear a Kentucky shirt today?
It would be fine if I took my outer shirt off.
This is what I keep telling. This is what I keep telling you about. Our guest today is my friend Jon Cowherd, a Kentucky-raised, New Orleans-schooled, New York-based pianist and composer. Here he is pre-jazz. And here's Jon with his little girl, who I can only assume he's never said the word no to. At least I know I couldn't. Jon may be best known for his long-running partnership with Brian Blade, with whom he co-founded the Brian Blade Fellowship Band, a band whose dedication to brotherhood has led to 25 years together and a lot of beautifully sincere music. Jon's also the kind of musician who can lend his creativity and originality to serve musical diversity, which is why he's performed with Norah Jones, Brandi Carlile, Katie Lang, Rosanne Cash, Iggy Pop, Cassandra Wilson, John Scofield, Liz Wright, and Joni freaking Mitchell. Currently, he has a trio with these guys. And oh, as a disclaimer, he and I also share the same religion. I'm talking about Kentucky basketball. So yeah, we're really excited to have Jon play and speak with us today. Hope you enjoy. Oh, they were going already?
Good.
Yeah, I thought we started already.
Jon, welcome to our show. Thanks. I'm so excited. We had a big list. You're like way at the top of people. I was like, maybe we could get somebody like that. I'm not sure, but you know, we have a sort of a connection. You and I. We're both from the state of Kentucky. So my first question for you is the most important question that I will ever ask on this show, which is, you think we're gonna get to the Final Four this year? Do we have a team? Did you? Because we didn't.
It's a little warm in here.
We didn't talk about this
since we've known each other so long.
We didn't talk about this, did we? Did I tell you to wear a Kentucky shirt today?
It would be fine if I took my outer shirt off.
This is what I keep telling. This is what I keep telling you about. This is not a joke. It's our religion, okay?
Yeah, I get it now.
Whose number was this? 2009.
Is John Wall?
John Wall,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is awesome.
Dude, I've told Kat a little bit about this, but
I can be myself.
I have seen babies born wrapped in blue and white, like Superman when he came to Earth. Like, this is a very serious thing. I try to tell people here, they're like, what's it really like? And I'm like, well, think about the Yankees and all that history and winning and the expectations and all the money and all of that. But then imagine that there's nothing else to do. Like, really, nothing else to do. Especially in the wintertime in rural Kentucky. There's nothing to do. So it becomes like a cult, like a religion sort of thing. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to do it too.
Okay.
Do it.
Me too. No, I'm just kidding.
If you had a Kentucky shirt on right now, I would lose my mind.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
We didn't go to that game a couple years ago. I went with your sister.
I saw you at a game.
Yeah.
I ran into you at a game at the Barclays Center. Didn't I?
Yeah, that happened. I went with your sister 2 years ago to MSG though.
That's right, because I couldn't be there.
Seton Hall that was what it was.
Yeah,
I subbed for you on the gig.
Yeah. Thanks.
And they had there was like a last second shot. I had a meeting and I had to call the guy and be like, look, we're going in overtime. I'm sorry. I can't make it. You know, I'm going to be late.
I remember that. Was that Kevin Knox? Was that Kevin Knox year?
It was the year, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we hit like a half court shot and I turned towards your sister and like, I'm a little embarrassed at how much I screamed in her face. Like, it was a little kind of like ridiculous.
Yeah.
We were talking about sports and you were saying something like with your students, you were talking about sports with them? Or what
I always make sports analogies for things they have to learn in music. Yeah, we were talking about how, because music is something that happens in real time, just like sports,
Right.
there's so many comparisons that you can make.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot, like with practice and all that. When
I was just basically saying we're athletes as musicians.
Yeah.
In a way, it's mental and then the physical, and it's happening in real time.
And when it's a team,
That too.
Right.
Yeah,
really
yeah,
great.
exactly.
Yeah, the thing that gets me the most is you can't really think about what you're doing too much.
Right.
Like you see
You have to
basketball
react.
players miss free throws in the championship.
Right.
And it's like he never misses. And it's like,
Exactly.
well, obviously.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like if I'm playing at a place and like somebody walks in
Yeah.
and I'm like start playing differently, that's something in my head.
Yeah.
So like there's kind of a, I don't know, performance, you know, with all of that. I'd say ballerinas think the same thing.
Another thing I think a lot, like especially if I'm watching figure skating, for example, they all have coaches that help with the mental capacity of performing. But why don't musicians have mental coaches for performing?
So a good friend of mine from
That's a
college
cool
is a
idea.
teacher.
Yeah.
He's a like high school band director. And we were watching a game one time and Tubby Smith grabbed his son who was on the thing.
Right.
And you couldn't hear him, but you could see his mouth. He said, "You're stupid. That's what's wrong. You're just stupid." And my friend
Bless
looked at
his
me and he
heart.
goes, "My new teaching philosophy. This is what I'm going to do to my kids from now on." I was like, no,
That's-
you
yeah.
can't
Oh
do that. Can I get some like star stuff out of the way? Because you're a star and we're not. So like, I'm not a stargazer, but this isn't really about, you know, that. But when I see a bio that stretches from Brian Blade and John Patitucci, John Schofield, Cassandra Wilson, to Joni Mitchell, Nora Jones, Chris Thile, Roseanne Cash, Shaka Khan, Iggy Pop, I could go on. To me, I see like a really unique kind of musician who can be like really highly artistic in these different kind of flavors and situations. So I wanted to ask, like, does performing with all these different kind of, it's not just styles, these are genres. You know, we think of like a diverse jazz musician. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Matt.
We wanted to get him a stool so he could, and a little
I
microphone.
know.
you know?
He could be like Paul Schaefer.
But he won't stay on it. You know, we think of diverse jazz musicians as people who will play standards and free, but like this is beyond that. This is different genres and stuff that you're putting yourself into. And to me, I kind of grew up having to play R&B music and blues music and jazz standards and free stuff and contemporary music. Like that's something I think really special that not everybody is able to do. So does it take like two engines running at the same time, like artistic and kind of a craft professional thing? Like how do you jump into a situation like that where somebody's like, we're playing my style of music and you need to be an artist in that?
Right. The question I ask myself is, what are my boundaries? Because in a way, you know, that particularly with different genres, there are people like creativity, but there's like sort of a limit of where you can go. That's one of the things. I mean, I guess you have to begin with what's the vocabulary too.
Yeah.
You know, what's the vocabulary? How far can I take things? Because I find a lot of even, you know, the so-called pop musicians and artists like to be surprised too. You know, they don't want to hear
Interesting.
what's on the record all the time or their classics or whatever. And so, I mean, I guess there are these, without having a real list that I ask myself, those are sort of random thoughts I think about. But I think the root of a lot of the people I've gotten to play with and the root of so much American music, maybe almost all of it is Black American music and how much I love it.
Yeah.
Blues and gospel. And being in New Orleans, when I went to school not really knowing any jazz. I'd heard it a little bit.
Okay.
And I was a French horn major. So I got down there.
I'm sorry about that, by the way.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Kat grew up playing the French horn
Yeah,
too.
I always love it.
right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
If you guys want to talk to your therapist about that, it's an incredibly difficult instrument, you know, like maybe one of the hardest instruments to play.
Yeah, it's
so.
crazy.
But sorry.
So I didn't really have a classical piano background.
Okay.
And I think, you know, being in New Orleans and being surrounded by so many different kinds of New Orleans music, that's really, a lot of it, it comes from Africa. You know, I think that if I use that approach on so much of the music I play with different people, it seems to always be right.
Okay.
Or it works. You
Okay.
know, and that's not to say that, you know, it is the right thing, but it seems to be, you know, like the gospel thing is it really influenced me. And when I first moved to New York from New Orleans, I got to play at a church for like a year that was all Black gospel music.
Great.
You know, and it was like, that was life-changing.
I remember sitting in with a blues band at an audition, and they were like, all right, just blow over this blues, just solo. And I did, and they kind of had this look like, something ain't right. And I was like, whoa, let me try it again. And then I just played like some gospel-y, bluesy stuff over it. And that stuff, bluegrass, all of this stuff, it's really particular. It's hard to get the details right. I mean, I just think a musician who's able to do all that stuff is like, I don't know, it's something I look up to.
Well, I mean, I've really looked up to artists that it doesn't matter what situation they're in, and they're in situations like R&B to jazz. John Scofield,
right?
Herbie Hancock, Kenny Kirkland,
right?
People that can be themselves, and they're not changing really that much,
right?
Yeah.
And someone calls Herbie because they want that, and they call Scofield, whoever it is, they want that sound and that exploratory, experimental, stepping out a little bit kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I love that. I mean, I'm not in that situation, but I love playing with singers. I love like the mantra aspect of finding a part.
Yeah.
And just repeating a part with a groove. You know, like,
totally.
I mean, I just enjoy it. And I don't, to me, there's no like, oh, geez, this is too simple or whatever.
No, you feel like you're part of something,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kat, we both do a bunch of different things along this line. Like, we joke that, like, in another life, we would have been in hippie jam bands. If we didn't go to music school, we would have been touring with, like,
Grateful
opening
Dead,
for Fish or something like that.
Yes.
It's been a different life for sure.
Right.
But
I had a teacher in New Orleans, the great Johnny Vidakovich, awesome jazz drummer, who played a lot of different styles. He played with Professor Longhair. He played, I don't know who else. He played with Scofield, and he was a very free, or is, he's still around, he's still playing. It's kind of like Paul Motion, kind of Elvin,
right,
kind of New Orleans street beat. And he said, if you play with a great feel, everyone's going to call you. And I didn't master that. In fact, I was like, oh, okay, great. That sounds boring.
Yeah.
Like, I want to practice harmony, and I want to play outside, and I want to be able to play giant steps at any tempo.
Sure.
But, so for years and years and years, I was just like, I didn't really understand that or care as much. But that's the difficulty of playing something that's like simple, or and it has to feel great.
Yeah.
And it's so overlooked too, because the audience doesn't notice it because it feels so good.
Right, that's true.
So they notice everything that's virtuosic.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they take it
right.
for granted what's simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. But they connect to it, if something feels right, I think that's...
But that's what I mean. It's just, it's taken for granted as a must-have. You don't notice it anymore,
Right.
It's like people don't notice the bass too much or the drums too much because it's just perfect. It's just there.
Right.
They don't stand out. It feels good.
Along those lines, when I listen to your original music that you composed and that you're playing with your group, so it's like your project, your philosophy, I still hear a lot of blending of styles and elements. But it sounds like your own voice. So, like, how... We subscribe to this too, but like when you write, is there like an anchor that you're trying? I hear a lot of like you'll write something really contemporary, but it's bluesy.
That's a good question. I mean, I love melody. On the French horn, I remember playing some things where I was like, wow, this melody. Or I played cornet before that, and I remember playing a Ravel Pavane for a Dead Infant, I think was the piece, and the melody just like blew me away.
Right.
God, this is incredible. Like, how can I write something? Maybe I want. So it's almost like every time I sit down to write, I'm like, I have to write a melody like that.
Great.
It's not conscious, but I think that standard is somewhere in my subconscious.
Right.
And I just try to write a great melody, and then I want some surprises somewhere in the music.
Okay.
And I mean, these are just things that I like. So I don't sit down with an agenda, but usually when I write, I sit down just to play.
So you're not writing on Sibelius. You're not composing your
I have
charts
done that
there.
where I'm not at the piano.
Right.
Where I just am putting notes on the screen. I've done that.
It sounds more difficult to me personally.
To write on software like that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you've already grown up writing on an instrument or in your head or something like that, singing, that's one thing. But I think there's a lot of people who are coming out of music school who are writing on these apps primarily, and it seems
Maybe,
to lose some of that, like a melody that you can sing and give to somebody, or you know what I mean? It's easier to like, oh no, this line is very interesting. Trust me, I've seen it on the staff.
There's a lot of music that I hear that sounds like computer music.
Yeah.
Alien.
So
kinda.
do you sit down and you just kind of improvise until you find?
Yeah.
I do that a lot too.
Yeah. I feel like that's where I've come up with my favorite things that I've written. And usually it's kind of an emotional thing. Like I'll play something, then I'll realize like, oh, I'm getting like a tingle or whatever from whatever that is. Yeah. And then I'll record it with my voice memo on the phone.
It sounds so simple and so like we wouldn't even have to say that. I think if I was like, I always have this fantasy that there's some 17-year-old kid in Sweden watching this who wants to be you, you know? And I'm like, if they heard, I think they should hear that it's like, no. If something makes you feel something when you write it, you're on the right path, you know?
Yeah, it's like a really nice place to start. And then I always think fleshing it out and the form of the piece is the most challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm really into form in the emotional sense, I think, and that might have to do with gospel music too, because a lot of the pieces we played when I played at this church, there would be like a basic form of a song, like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. And then you'd get to the end and there would be this tag that was based on elements of the song somewhere, but it took you to a slightly new place. Maybe it got even more emotional. And I would always like start freaking out when I got to this section. I'm like, how can I put that into music that I write? You know? Or what is it about that why is that so great? Or listening to anything that I love, why does that move me? You know?
Yeah. Right.
And a lot of it is where certain things happen at a certain time, where you've heard like a melody and you've heard it develop, and then the way it changes with maybe some different chords or a different groove at the end.
Kind of like, I just got to put this out there because my daughter has been listening to Hey Jude incessantly. Mm-hmm. She's obsessed with the song Hey Jude. And does that describe what you're talking about? Because by the time it gets to the na-na-nas, it's like 4 minutes longer than the actual piece itself.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the part
Layla
everybody
does that
loves.
too, where the coda is like its own song. I love codas.
Yeah.
I like codas that are like
codas.
completely different thing. I wrote a completely different song here, and I like codas that are like, it's kind of like before, but you're not going to expect what's coming. I love codas. So like,
we all like codas. I like this. This is good.
I mean, that's sort of one example.
Yeah.
Not every song has a coda that I write, but
my songs are all codas. It's just one coda and then another coda, then another coda.
We had a joke about, because we were getting into these endings we were playing with a fellowship band, and we're like, let's do a record that's just endings.
How long have you been in the fellowship band? Can we talk about that group for a minute?
Yeah, I don't really talk about it that much, I guess. We started, Brian approached me in 96, I think. And he's like, Blue Note Records wants me to make a record. And I want to start a band. You want to start a band with me? And
And you were in New York at the time?
I was in New York, and we had gone to school in New Orleans together.
You knew each other from there.
Became like really great friends right off the bat. And we used to practice together and jam. And then I came to New York and went to Manhattan School of Music, and he after 1 or 2 years in school, just took off on the road with different people. Marcus Roberts, Alice Marsalis, Josh Redmond, Kenny Garrett.
Yeah.
You know, and then
he was
Blue Note
pretty
approached him.
He
was, he probably would have been about, I don't know, 25 or something.
Yeah.
And of course, Blue Note wanted him to make a record with established all-stars. But he stood his ground, and he said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to have a band. And so he asked me to put it together, and we both chose the musician.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he's like, we'll do the writing. And so that was 96. In 97, I think we did the first recording.
A lot of that album sounds... It has that kind of sound. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah,
but
well, we've always had a chemistry, Brian and I, and like a lot of the same things. And some of our teachers in New Orleans really influenced us too. So I think when I write, sometimes I have that standard too. Like there is a guitarist named Steve Mazikowski. Great guitar player, great improviser, jazz player, but he writes these incredible tunes.
Okay.
And so I'm like, I want to write something like that every time I write. And I think Brian is influenced by him as well. We had, similar influences.
And this band's been the same for, what is that? You're talking 25 years or something,
Almost
right?
25
like the personnel,
years.
This is kind of atypical of what I see in the scene. A lot of times it's like, I'm going to hire these 3 guys for this album and do a couple showcase gigs. And, we didn't get famous. So I'm going to hire 4 more different people and totally change it up next time. And granted, they're not being hired by Blue Note and, already kind of playing with famous people like Brian was and all that. But still, the idea that to keep a band together is kind of phenomenal, if you think about it. Watching a little bit of the Beatles documentary, and even they had a hard time with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Can you talk about that? Just being brothers rather than hired guns?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it, had to do with who we initially picked to be in the band. And they were people that we really, obviously hit it off with musically. And Chris Thomas was in New Orleans with us, with Brian and I. And so we played together a lot down there. And he was, the obvious choice for that. And then hanging around Smalls in the 90s, we heard Melvin Butler and Myron Walden, both.
Okay.
So we chose them. And I think it was just, and I think it's Brian's spirit and his vision too. He always wanted to have a band that stayed together and
That's
had
great.
a long career.
But even through people are having kids, people are getting married, they're moving, they're getting houses, stuff like that. You still kept the band together.
Yeah, and
I'm just trying to see if there's even a chance maybe I could get the gig. You know what I mean? I'm just kidding. But
well, the other thing about Brian is if he's approached with an opportunity and people are not available, he won't do it.
Wow.
Now there have been situations where someone was off on the road for a long time, and we're like, okay, well, are we going to wait around a year? So there have been some subs here and there. So there is a chance.
Okay.
How far in advance do you plan ahead for those, talking
I was kidding. Just so we're clear. I'm just kidding. Unless it's available. And then, sorry, what were you saying?
Well, it's just, the more life throws stuff at you, the more you feel like you have to plan way in advance. So you plan tours a year or more in advance?
Yeah, sometimes 2.
Yeah.
Rarely, but usually a year. People book a year in advance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Once one festival's done, they're already thinking about the next year.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about New Orleans? We've had a lot of, you're in Brooklyn, you're a Brooklyn musician,
yes.
Just like us,
Yeah.
but we've had a lot of people here that didn't make that stop in their life. And I love the city, I love the culture, the food, the music and all of that. And it such a part of American history.
So I go to New Orleans, and I'm a French horn major, and I'm in these general music classes with students that
Did you want to be an orchestral French horn player?
At that time, I think I was headed in that direction. I wasn't sure, because I loved rock music, and I liked classical music.
There was a taste of the dark side.
There was.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I think I wanted to be kind of a keyboard like rock player too, but like
cool.
I wasn't going to get a scholarship on rock keyboard.
Sure.
Or anything for that matter. But I did get to New Orleans, and there were students that had been playing jazz since they were like 9.
Right.
Harry Connick Jr. was in my classes.
Yeah.
And his dad...
That's why it's interesting to me that you made that switch and kept with it. You know what I mean? It's a lot of people, they see that and they're like, oh, you've been playing jazz since a fetus? Like, you already know giant steps? Like, it's too late for me. But it's not, you know.
I think I was naive into how difficult it would be.
Good.
Because I remember thinking, oh, if I spend such and such hours a day, I think I can be as good as Harry Connick Jr. It was just like... Which I didn't spend those hours a day, but he, I just made me really want to do it. And there were other students too, great jazz musicians, and older players that would come back, like Herlin Riley, and there was a guy, Victor Goines, who went on to play in Lincoln Center, and Wynton would come through town a lot.
Right.
And they were into meeting with younger musicians, and they're very into education, and even the local guys too, all the local players.
Okay.
Were into passing the music down to younger, interested musicians.
That does seem. Look, people are like that here, but it does seem a little different.
It is different.
Yeah.
I was talking to a drummer who just moved there, who's like this established drummer who's been on tons of rock records, and he's like, Matt Chamberlain is his name. And he was like, I just got this place in New Orleans, and there's this vibe there that everyone's interested in, like trying something different and playing free music, and people are jamming, and in the bigger cities, New York, LA, because the cost of living is so much more, you're too worried about how you're going to make, rent and everything to show up to like jam sessions and try some new stuff, So there are exceptions to this, of course.
Sure.
But
so then why New York? Why aren't you in New Orleans then?
Well, I almost went back.
Yeah.
About 10 years ago. I almost went back, and then a series of only in New York things happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. This show's, it's about promoting musicians, but we're also trying to promote sort of the scene here. And I do think it's unique as compared to anywhere in the world.
It is.
So like, what is it about this place, from your perspective? We've asked a lot of people this, but like, what is it about this place?
Well, the difference... And I found this when I was going to move back to New Orleans. And you think I would have learned the first time that the seriousness that's here.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy to live. People that are very serious stay here. And it doesn't mean the people that leave aren't as serious. But when you're here, I mean, there is creativity. There's a lot of getting together and jamming and things, but there's something about the easiness of New Orleans that's attractive too.
I was in LA for 4 years, so there's a lot of musicians, a great scene. I love it, but there's this joke that the stages of evolution of man, that chart that shows us finally standing up at the end. Yeah. There's one of bass players in Los Angeles, and they start out, they move there and they start out, and then they kind of stand up a little bit. And then they lower their strings. Yeah. And then they're on a stool. And then the last one is they're playing electric bass.
That's a good one.
So ridiculous. But my friend said he was going to make that shirt someday. So,
That's great.
Yeah, I like it.
I think it's just so cutthroat here. And Kat put it best one time. She said, well, everybody's doing so much that when you see somebody and they're like, I got to go, I got this project.
I know.
It kind of makes you go, what am I doing right now? I better do something today, Yeah.
The
other thing we ask is something you wish you had known when you were younger. And my joke lately is it could be when you were 5 or 17 or 22 or maybe even late 2019. You might have wished you'd known something back then that you know now, Yeah. Anything you wish you had known that you could tell yourself, go back in a time machine and say, don't take that gig, or treat this musician better, or like, you know, musicians are hard to get along
social
with.
things all the time.
Okay.
I'm like, you know, should I have said this? Should I have done that?
Right.
I mean, I can't point to one thing. I mean, I used to really worry about, you know, decisions and things and what did I do the wrong thing. And now I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. I am who I am.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I used to really, when I first got to New Orleans, I was a little bit like, why did I grow up in Paducah, Kentucky, which is a great place, where there was no jazz?
Right.
And I'm way behind everybody.
Yeah.
And I had, you know.
Is Paducah, is it a dry?
It's not.
Okay. Because I grew up in a dry county surrounded by dry counties. So, like, there's no music.
There were dry counties around, but people would come into Paducah to get alcohol.
All right.
But there wasn't a live music scene, except some maybe top 40 and country, a couple of country bands. And even then, you know, I wasn't into country music, and I was too young to go to bars and things, but there was no live music.
You think that gave like a wanderlust?
Yeah.
Do you think you were like, man, I want to get somewhere where there's something going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah. If I look back on all that now, I mean, not only did I learn a lot of classical, you know, important things about composing and classical music and things like that from not having a jazz background, from just being classical. But yeah, there was that growing up in a small town thing too, which I think has kept me in New York for so long, where I'm like, I just love being feeling like I'm in the middle of a lot of creativity.
Me too.
And New Orleans was like that. When I got to New Orleans, like all these talented kids and people in Paducah had been like, oh, you're so advanced at your age. And, and I really wasn't on the scale that I thought I was. You know, I played by ear. I could play some Journey songs, some Beatles songs.
Good.
I get to New Orleans, and Harry Connick Jr. is in my class, and he's like, I would go to these parties, and he would entertain at like the piano in the apartment.
Yeah.
Singing and playing, and I was blown away.
Right.
He was incredible.
Yeah.
At 17 going on 18.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I grew up in this place where there was no music and it was all country, and if there was any music, some classical music. And I was darker on it than I am now.
Right.
And than I should have been. And now I look back and it was a great experience. In New Orleans, there was a lot of music going on, and I was such a straight ahead jazzer because I needed to catch up, and I was like obsessed with learning, that I missed out on a lot of great other musicians that were still around playing.
Interesting.
That are more in the like R&B and, you know, New Orleans funk and different things that like, there was a drummer named James Black, and he was a great jazz drummer, great composer. But like I didn't really get to hear him play, and, you know, now I'm like way into all these other New Orleans genres, I guess, that I wish I had taken advantage of.
Some of those things have really come along since then, though.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
that street, the whole street funk thing, you know? I mean, you see brass bands in New York sometimes playing that style, and I don't know if that was happening earlier.
Yeah.
Do you have any projects you want to plug? Anything you want to...
There's a label, Lecoq Records, that I'm putting a record out on. It's basically a trio record with a couple of special guests. It's me and John Patitucci and Brian Blade, with Chris Potter playing on 3 songs and Alex Acuna playing percussion on 3 songs.
Nice.
Cool.
And it's mainly my tunes, one of John Patitucci's songs and one of Brian's.
Yeah.
And that's coming out.
I love that trio, the Mercy stuff and all that. It's just,
thanks.
I don't know. It's just, it's great. It's fun to listen to too. You know what I mean? It's just like, feels good. So, cool. Thanks for being on the show. We just love having you. It really means a lot. And, you know, I'll see you at the Final Four.
Absolutely. Go Wildcat.